We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to discuss an interesting game. Not so much based on the outcome or the matchups and things like that, like I usually do, but focusing really on the two quarterbacks in this game between the Browns and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Browns will travel to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles, obviously. Two teams that I think, looking at the beginning of the year and the offseason and training camp and how the Eagles brought in Saquon and how they were pretty much bringing everyone back, and the Browns were sticking with Deshaun Watson. They still had that same great defense. Kevin Stefanski is a great coach. We certainly expected a lot more out of these two teams compared to where they are right now. These were two of the teams that I'm sure a lot of people had penciled in to certainly be in the playoffs or at least be competing for their division, certainly. And we haven't really seen that to its fullest extent so far through the year. And it looks like these two teams not only are not performing, but are having a lot of issues within the organization, right? You look at the Eagles, that whole thing with Sirianni, does he have the full trust of the locker room? Is he having a problem with Jalen Hurts? Have they addressed what Jalen Hurts said after their game against the Buccaneers? It all seems a bit murky right now within that organization. And for the Browns, similarly, right, dealing with Deshaun Watson and the off-the-field stuff with his contract, is that preventing them from benching him? Is Kevin Stefanski even allowed to bench him? Things like that are all speculative, of course, but they become more solidified when things aren't performing and fans are looking for answers and they're not provided, or it's kind of danced around. And that's where we get to these two quarterbacks, most of all because of the position that they play, but also on their displays that we've seen so far on Sundays out of both of these guys that have gotten a lot of criticism and have people seriously doubting them and their abilities and their capabilities of their play so far. Looking at Deshaun Watson and Jalen Hurts, obviously, it wasn't too long ago, which is the craziest thing, that we were looking at Deshaun Watson, hitting that superstardom level in Houston, carrying an awful roster and, being everything for the city of Houston and giving them that hope, right, that they found their franchise quarterback. But of course, things didn't work out as a lot of people would have hoped in Houston, and he wanted a trade. They came to the conclusion that they were going to trade him, and based on that, and based on the level that he was playing at so early on in his career, almost like Jaden Daniels is now, if we were going to compare to anybody, or C.J. Stroud, if you will. He obviously gets traded to the Browns, and for whatever reason, right, we're not going to speculate what it is with Deshaun. We could talk about what that is for days, right? If it's mental or whatever it may be, right? We haven't seen that same Deshaun Watson that we've seen in Houston, still year 3 or 4, I believe, now in Cleveland, and it's a problem. It's a real problem because we don't really have the answer of how and why Deshaun has sort of dropped off like this. And also, talking about Jalen Hurts and talking about how not too long ago we were discussing Jalen Hurts bringing this Eagles team to the Super Bowl and outplaying Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl as well. Unfortunately, they didn't win, but it felt like a moment where Jalen, although the Eagles lost the Super Bowl, it felt like a moment where Jalen was really going to establish himself as the quarterback, as a prominent top 3, top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And now you're left wondering, from what we've seen so far through 5 weeks, what the F is happening with both of these quarterbacks, right? Both look like they've digressed potentially in a lot of people's eyes, but certainly they've done no more than at least plateau at the max level that we've seen them through their career so far, right? Deshaun has definitely not gotten better. We haven't even seen his peak level yet in Cleveland. And Jalen Hurts is another one that we're kind of waiting to see that Jalen that took this Eagles team to the Super Bowl, and it just feels like the decision making is off, or the offense doesn't fit, or it feels like it's close. It's not like he's playing too bad, but it's not the level that we saw in 2022 when they made it to the Super Bowl. So that's another big thing, because you look at this Eagles team and it seems like they have everything, right? You look at what they have going for them on offense. The offensive line, not really a problem. The wide receivers, certainly not a problem with both Smitty and A.J. Brown. The tight ends, great. Dallas Goedert. Running back, we're not even going to talk about Saquon Barkley, obviously. The defense is or has proven to be more of a liability, I would say, over the last couple weeks based on their performances. But again, by no means the worst in the NFL. I would probably put the Bengals or the the obvious teams like the Panthers or things like that, the Cardinals, the Rams potentially with how young they are under them. But still, with everything they have going for them, you don't really know where to put your finger on why Jalen isn't where he should be, right? You would still probably think that he should be getting better, but like I said, it looks like at most both of these quarterbacks have plateaued on their trajectory, which seemed to be going like in a straight line just upwards, right? But now they really hit a curve and we're wondering why. And looking at their performances so far through 2024, looking at the categories of passing yards, passing touchdowns, interceptions, QBR, completion percentage, and sacks, both of these quarterbacks are no higher than middle of the pack in all of these categories, right? You look at, I would say, the most alarming ones, which is QBR. Deshaun Watson is last in the NFL in QBR with 21 on average, and Jalen Hurts is 13th with a 59.3 QBR through only 4 games compared to Deshaun Watson's 5 games. You look at the passing yards as well. Deshaun Watson is 26th in the NFL in passing yards with 852, and Jalen Hurts has 930 passing yards, and he's 23rd in the NFL in those categories. Passing touchdowns, Deshaun Watson has 5, which is tied for 17th, and Jalen Hurts has 4, which is 25th through 4 games as well. Interceptions, Deshaun Watson has 3, which is the 4th most in the NFL, and Jalen Hurts has 4 interceptions, which is the 3rd most in the NFL. And their completion percentage, not too great for Deshaun Watson. He's at a 60%, which is 29th in the NFL, and Jalen Hurts has a 68.2 completion percentage, which is 12th in the NFL. And Deshaun Watson has been sacked the most times in the NFL so far at 26, and Jalen Hurts has been sacked 13 times so far. And all of those numbers are obviously not good, not what fans of these two teams want to see so far through the year, and that's why individually and as a team, this game is so important to me, because how ironic both of these teams, both of these quarterbacks are having questions. The teams aren't looking great. The defense for the Browns is looking pretty well, but the offense is struggling. The Eagles, their offense is struggling for how it's built up. They're now going to be looking at each other across the field, and I think it's like kind of funny how it reflects on both of them. So that's why this game is so important, I believe, because not only are the Browns 1-4, the Eagles are 2-2, and they have to try and keep pace in their divisions as well. And getting the win is obviously the main goal of this game. You don't want to make it too focused in on just these two quarterbacks, because the game obviously comes down to a lot more. But to really prove a point, I think, in this game, and I believe that both of these quarterbacks individually should be wanting to go out there and prove a point, their performances and how well they played, not just on getting the result, is also going to be looked at and dissected as well. And if we had to answer some of these questions like I had on here, who has more to lose in this game? If, say, Deshaun Watson loses, the Browns are going to be 1-5, so that's obviously really bad. If Jalen Hurts and the Eagles lose, they'll be 2-3, and based on how the Commanders are playing and the Cowboys still having a winning record, it looks a little bit dicey there in that situation. So, to me, who has more to lose in this game? I would say Deshaun Watson, just because he could get benched, and there's all that talk about this being the worst trade in NFL history, the contract that the Browns still owe him and whatnot. I know it doesn't directly affect him, but those are the things that are being brought up, right? The historical aspect of this trade and how bad it could truly be is something that I feel like Deshaun has to lose more of compared to Jalen Hurts, right, who obviously wasn't traded there or anything. And also in Philadelphia, if anything was going to happen, I feel like they'd fire Nick Sirianni first before even looking at Jalen Hurts. So he kind of has that leeway there. Sirianni's not in the greatest of feelings with the Philadelphia Eagles fans. You know, a lot of them are pointing the blame to him. So I feel like they would fire Nick Sirianni first before they decided to bench Hurts or something like that. People are seriously talking about benching Deshaun Watson, so I feel like he has more to lose in this game. And also, who or which team needs this win more based on their overall performances and just what it means for them? I would say that the Eagles need to win this game more because they're coming off of a bye, so that it makes it really hard to believe that they're ill prepared when they've had all this time knowing that they were going to play the Browns. I mentioned before the division, the NFC East is still miraculously within an arm's length, right? The Cowboys are still right there, and the Commanders, right? They're 4-1, but they're so young. You know, there could be that opportunity where something goes wrong, and how young they are, do they have the experience to kind of maneuver through those hurdles? So it's still right there for the Eagles. So winning this game, I believe, will go a long way, especially with how the Cowboys schedule plays out. The Eagles, if they win this game, would have the same record as them, and they could have a better outlook on their schedule because they don't play as tough opponents as the Cowboys do. And also, it looks like they're going to have everyone back in this game, right? Where against Tampa, there was no Devontae Smith, no A.J. Brown, as reasons why Jalen and this offense really didn't look that good. I still don't love the idea of them passing it as much as they did to start the game. That part's wrong, but the fact that they're going to have those guys back, the defense being doubted and being scrutinized as well, they have a point to prove. I believe that that whole motivation factor for the Eagles, I think, is going to be more a reason why they need this win more so than the Cleveland Browns. Because if the Cleveland Browns win, they'll be 2-4 and still in the AFC with the toughest schedule in the entire NFL. It's not going to move the needle too much for me, so that's also why I think the Eagles need this win more. And lastly, who do I think is going to play better and probably win this game out of Deshaun and Jalen Hurts? I would probably say Jalen Hurts because he's got all the weapons back, similar to what I just said about the entire team. It'll certainly help Jalen Hurts out more to have Smitty, to have A.J. Brown out there, and they should use Saquon more, but those guys obviously make a difference. They line up the boxes if Jalen decides to run it or if Saquon decides to run it, and they obviously get open a lot better, so I feel like that'll help him out more. That's going to be a refreshing sight to see for Jalen out there. I'm sure it'll take some of the pressure off of him as well, whereas the Cleveland Browns and Deshaun Watson, you know, they're not missing anybody. They're just playing at a very poor level with Jerry Jeudy in there, with Amari Cooper, with David Njoku back. Yeah, they don't have Nick Chubb, but we knew that going into the season, right? It's not like they lost him or anything like that. They haven't had him this entire time, so they're just playing at a poor level, whereas the Eagles, you kind of have those excuses there to say that they don't have their top two wide receivers or things like that. So that's why I feel like Jalen is going to play better. He's going to have his guys back. They're at home as well, coming off of a bye. If they lose off of a bye to this Browns team, to how Deshaun Watson's playing, it's going to be, I don't know if I'd be more surprised with the Browns winning or the Eagles dropping that sort of game. So they better win this game or else it's going to get really bad. And maybe like Nick Sirianni could get fired if they lose this game. I don't think that's an overreaction, honestly. So they'll probably win this game. Jalen Hurts will play better if I had to pick one of these two guys, but certainly a big game nonetheless for both of these quarterbacks. And speaking about big games for quarterbacks, we talked about Drake May. The announcement came earlier in the week that he was going to be the starter against the Houston Texans. We're going to touch some more on that, what Gerard Mayo had to say about it, and what Drake May has to say going into his first start against the Houston Texans. We'll touch on that topic when we return in just a few seconds.